Matzah! Seriously, can you imagine if that was my answer? That I guess spent the whole video talking about matzah. I got no money from the Straits people, by the way, for that. Straits, call me. Greetings, Seeker. I want to spend a few minutes talking with you about Passover. Passover is perhaps the most widely observed Jewish holiday. It's estimated that 70% of Jews worldwide will observe Passover by attending a Seder meal. The Seder is a special meal that we have on the first night of Passover, and some people do it also on the second night of Passover, and it's where we get together with people and we tell our origin story, our master story as a people. Now, you might think that Genesis was the master story of our people. The world was created, God made friends with this guy named Abraham, and so on and so forth. But where we really coalesced as a people with a special relationship with God was in Exodus, or Shemot in Hebrew, because that's when the Hebrew people were slaves in Egypt, and they cried out to God, and God remembered that special bond that God had with Abraham, and God came to the rescue, and he picked a guy named Moses to help him out. And there was a stick, and there was blood, and there were frogs, but that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that God heard our cry and came and did something about it and redeemed our entire people from captivity, brought them out of Egypt to be a free and self-determining people. And we keep the spirit of that story alive and the reality of our relationship with God alive by retelling the story every single year around a table. Some people might do it at a community center, some people might do it at a synagogue, but the most common observance is to get together in a family home and do this as a family, as an extended family, as a group of friends. And we have a long feast of a meal accompanied by storytelling and question asking and song singing and afikomen hiding. And this ritual, this tradition, this custom of gathering is so important that I wanted to spend a few minutes telling you what I think is the most important thing to have at your Seder table this year. Important, but that's not my point. First, let me tell you a tale of two Seders. Many years ago, when I lived in Minneapolis, I attended two different Passover Seders. One at one friend's house, one at another friend's house, and all of these friends had grown children who had gone off and launched and started their own lives. At the first Seder, one of these children came to spend Passover with their family, as many people do, and during the Seder, he made the argument to me that the Jewish people was done. The whole project of Judaism was over with his generation. His would be the last generation of Jews. And he knew this because after the Seder, he was going to a bar to drink beer. Beer is not kosher for Passover because the rabbi said it's like bread. I don't know what beer you're drinking. And at this bar, instead of peanuts or pretzels to make you thirsty, they serve bacon. So this young man was convinced that the whole project of Judaism was kaput because during Passover, he felt no problem drinking beer and eating bacon. The next night, I went to another family's house, and they had some other families there, all of whom had grown children who had launched and started their own lives. And the common complaint among these families was that their children had become super religious. They'd moved to Israel, or they'd moved someplace to an Orthodox community, and their observance of the dietary laws was so strict that they no longer felt comfortable eating in their own parents' home. So on the one hand, beer and bacon for Passover. On the one hand, I'm so Jewish that I can't eat at my parents' house. For me, the moral of the story was that the Jewish people are just fine. Someplace, on average, the mean of these two stories meant that we were going to get along just fine, that these were extremes, that these are outliers, but the average that they represent means that we're going to be a long-lived people as we have been. But this year I have a second takeaway. This past Shabbat, it was my turn to read the Haftarah. And so I made a special study of the Haftarah, the reading from the prophets for Shabbat Hagadol, the last Shabbat before Passover. And at the very end of it, it talks about the prophet Elijah. Now, if you've been to a Passover Seder before, you might have noticed that there's an extra cup on the table that nobody drinks from. And they pour a full cup near the end of the Seder, and they say, this is Elijah's cup. And they open the door to welcome in Elijah, who never ever comes yet. And the reason we do this is we have a tradition that Elijah will come before the days of Mashiach, before the Messiah, whether you believe that that's a person that's going to solve all their problems, or it's going to be an enlightened age of peace among the nations and peace between people. However you believe the Messiah is coming, Elijah is going to be the advanced PR team. And in the reading we had this past Shabbat from the prophet Milwaukee, it talks about this. God says, I will send the prophet Elijah in advance of the great and awesome day of the Lord. He's talking about eschatology. He's talking about the end times or the end of history, the apocalypse, which in its proper translation means the beginning of a new era, the beginning of Mashiach, the beginning of an era of peace. And this is why we set a place for Elijah at our Passover table. But what I want to point out is the verse right after that. And it says, Elijah will reconcile the hearts of parents to their children and the hearts of children to their parents. Now here we have, right before our Passover feast, where we get together, often multiple generations, whether they're related or not. It's like a big annual Jewish family reunion. So this Monday night, 70% of the world's Jews will be getting together to eat dinner with multiple generations in the same space. Politics may come up, religion may come up, some other topic you're not supposed to mention in mixed company may come up, and there's going to be disagreements, and there's going to be arguments. It's like 2 nights of Thanksgiving, really. Is there a Friends Seder afterwards? But what this reading from Milwaukee tells me is that the most important thing that we can have at our Seder this year is open hearts. In this prophecy, God could have passed along to us, okay, Elijah is coming, everybody keep kosher. Elijah is coming, everybody observe Shabbat. Elijah is coming, make sure you're not mixing linen and wool fibers. What is the mitzvah that God calls out at this potential moment of an era of peace? Returning the hearts of parents to their children and returning the hearts of children to their parents. As you're preparing your table for a Passover feast, or as you're preparing to attend one of these events with people you may not have seen for a year or several years, there's one extra thing I want to make sure you bring to the table this year. Have an open heart. Open your heart to your parents, whatever disagreements you've had in the past. Open your hearts to your children, whatever decisions they're making that you disagree with. If you're having a Seder with friends and no family, that doesn't excuse you from opening your heart to people with different ideas, especially if they're of a different generation. I fully believe that what we need most this Passover is to have open hearts with each other, because I fully believe with all my heart that what we need most as Jews, as humans, as earthlings, is each other. And from the bottom of my heart, I hope my open heart this year, I wish you a happy Passover, and I wish you happiness and peace together. I'll see you on the next video, friends. Be well.